Before we dive into this incredible story that will leave you speechless, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because stories like this one are exactly why you don't want to miss a single upload. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why family secrets can destroy everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. The words still echo in my mind like a broken record. "You're not even family!" My sister Jessica's voice cracked as she screamed those words across our grandmother's mahogany dining table, the same table where we'd shared countless Christmas dinners, birthday celebrations, and family gatherings for over 20 years. But that October evening in 2023, everything I thought I knew about my family came crashing down in the most brutal way possible. I'm Sarah, and I was 28 when this happened. Jessica is 2 years older, and we'd always been close, or so I thought. We grew up in a modest 2-story colonial house in Springfield, Massachusetts, where the autumn leaves were just beginning to turn their brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Our grandmother, Nana Rose, had been the glue holding our extended family together since our parents died in a car accident when I was 15 and Jessica was 17. The dinner that changed everything was supposed to be a celebration. Nana Rose had just turned 85, and the whole family had gathered at her house on Elm Street. The smell of her famous pot roast filled the air, mixing with the scent of apple cinnamon candles she always lit for special occasions. The dining room was warm and inviting, with its cream-colored walls adorned with decades of family photos, and her collection of vintage china displayed in the glass cabinet. Around the table sat Uncle Mike and Aunt Linda, my cousins Tommy and Rachel, Jessica with her husband David, and me. We were laughing about old memories when Nana Rose stood up, her frail hands gripping the edge of the table for support. At 85, she still had those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you, though her once dark hair had turned silver and her voice had grown softer with age. "I have something important to discuss with all of you," she began, her voice carrying that familiar authority that had kept our family in line for decades. "I've been thinking about my will, and I want to make some changes." The laughter died instantly. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner, its steady rhythm suddenly feeling ominous. Uncle Mike shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while Aunt Linda's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Jessica's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "I've decided," Nana Rose continued, "that I want to leave the house to Sarah." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my heart skip a beat, not from excitement, but from the sudden tension that filled the room like thick smoke. This house wasn't just a building. It was worth nearly $500,000 in today's market, sitting on 2 acres of prime real estate in one of Springfield's most desirable neighborhoods. "What?" Jessica's voice was barely a whisper at first, but I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. "Nana, surely you mean both of us?" Nana Rose shook her head slowly. "No, dear, just Sarah. She's the one who's been here every week, helping with groceries, driving me to doctor's appointments, making sure I take my medications. She's the one who stayed local when everyone else moved away for better opportunities." It was true. After college, I'd deliberately chosen to work at a local marketing firm in Springfield, turning down offers from companies in Boston and New York specifically so I could be close to Nana Rose. Jessica had moved to Connecticut after marrying David, a successful investment banker. She visited maybe once a month, usually just for Sunday dinner, and even then, she spent most of the time on her phone dealing with work calls or coordinating her kids' soccer schedules. "But Nana," Uncle Mike interjected, his voice careful and measured, "Jessica is your granddaughter too. She has children to think about. College funds, their future." Jessica's face was turning red. That familiar flush she got when she was about to explode. I'd seen it countless times growing up, usually right before she'd throw one of her legendary tantrums. But we weren't children anymore. And this wasn't about who got the bigger piece of birthday cake. "Sarah doesn't even have kids," Jessica suddenly burst out, her voice rising. "She's single. She doesn't need a house this big. I have 2 children. David's business is struggling because of the economy, and we're already looking at taking out a second mortgage." The desperation in her voice was painful to hear, but there was something else underneath it, something darker. I could see David trying to calm her down, placing his hand on her arm, but she shook him off violently. "This is ridiculous," she continued, standing up so abruptly that her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "Sarah's always been your favorite, but this is going too far. What about the rest of us? What about family loyalty?" Nana Rose's expression remained calm, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. "Jessica, dear, This isn't about favorites. It's about responsibility, and responsibility? Jessica's laugh was harsh and bitter. You want to talk about responsibility? What about the responsibility of treating your grandchildren equally? What about the responsibility of not playing favorites just because one of us was desperate enough to stay in this dead-end town? The words hit me like physical blows. Dead-end town. Was that really how she saw the place where we'd grown up? Where our parents were buried? Where Nana Rose had built her life? Jessica, please. I finally spoke up, my voice shaking. Can we discuss this calmly? Maybe we can work something out. Work something out? She whirled around to face me. And for a moment, I didn't recognize the person standing there. This wasn't my sister. The girl who used to braid my hair and sneak me extra cookies. This was someone consumed by greed and resentment I never knew existed. You've been planning this, haven't you? She accused, her finger pointing at me like a weapon. All those visits, all that caring granddaughter act. You've been manipulating her this whole time, haven't you? Playing the devoted little saint while the rest of us were actually building lives for ourselves. That's not true. I stood up too, my own anger finally surfacing. I visit Nana because I love her. Because she's alone. Because she raised us after Mom and Dad died. How can you turn that into something ugly? Oh, please. Jessica's voice reached a pitch I'd never heard before. Don't act like you're some selfless angel. You stayed here because you couldn't make it anywhere else. You're 30 years old, Sarah, and what do you have to show for it? A mediocre job. No husband. No kids. No real life. At least I had the courage to leave this place and make something of myself. The cruelty in her words took my breath away. Around the table, everyone sat in stunned silence. Cousin Tommy was staring at his plate, while Rachel had tears in her eyes. Uncle Mike looked like he wanted to disappear entirely, but Jessica wasn't done. And you know what the worst part is? She continued, her voice getting higher and more hysterical. You're not even... She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she was about to cross a line she couldn't come back from. But the damage was already brewing, and I could see in her eyes that she'd made her choice. I'm not even what, Jessica? I asked quietly. The dining room felt like it was holding its breath. Even the grandfather clock seemed to have stopped ticking. Jessica's face went through a series of emotions. Anger, fear, regret, and then a cold determination that chilled me to the bone. You're not even family, she screamed, her voice cracking with the force of it. You're adopted. Mom and Dad never told you because they felt sorry for you. But you're not really our sister. You don't deserve any of this because you don't belong here. The world stopped. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach and struck by lightning at the same time. The room spun around me, and I had to grip the back of my chair to keep from falling. Adopted? How was that possible? I looked just like our father. Everyone always said so. We had the same dark hair, the same green eyes, the same stubborn chin. Jessica! Nana Rose's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. That's enough. But Jessica was beyond reason now. Years of resentment and jealousy had finally found their outlet, and she wasn't going to stop. She deserves to know the truth. She's been living a lie her whole life, and now she's about to inherit a house that should go to actual blood relatives. I looked around the table desperately, searching for someone to tell me this was all a cruel joke. But the expressions on everyone's faces told me everything I needed to know. Uncle Mike was pale as a ghost. Aunt Linda was crying silently, and Nana Rose looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Is it true? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Nana Rose's silence was answer enough. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, washing away 28 years of certainty about who I was. Every family photo, every shared memory, every time someone said I looked like Dad, it all felt like a lie now. I stumbled backward, needing to escape, needing air, needing anything but the suffocating weight of this new reality. Sarah, wait! Nana Rose called out, but I was already heading for the door. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. My apartment, a cozy one-bedroom place just 10 minutes from Nana Rose's house, suddenly felt like a stranger's home. I sat on my couch, staring at the family photos on my coffee table, wondering if I had any right to display them anymore. The next few days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and unanswered phone calls. Jessica tried calling twice, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Nana Rose called several times too, her voicemails increasingly desperate. Sarah, honey, please call me back. We need to talk. There's so much you don't understand. But what was there to understand? I'd been living a lie. Every family dinner, every holiday, every moment I'd felt grateful for the family that raised me after losing my real parents. It was all based on deception. It took me 3 days to finally call Nana Rose back. Her voice was hoarse when she answered, as if she'd been crying. "Sarah? Oh, thank God. Please come over. We need to talk." "I don't know if I can," I admitted. "I don't know what to think anymore. Please," she begged. "Give me a chance to explain." "Jessica," what she said. "It's not the whole truth." Something in her voice made me pause. Not the whole truth? What did that mean? An hour later, I was back in Nana Rose's living room, sitting in the same floral armchair where I'd curled up as a child while she read me bedtime stories. The afternoon sun streamed through her lace curtains, casting familiar patterns on the Persian rug that had been there for as long as I could remember. Nana Rose sat across from me, looking frailer than I'd ever seen her. In her lap was a wooden box I'd never seen before, old and worn, with brass hinges that had turned green with age. "Sarah," she began, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "What Jessica said was cruel and unnecessary, but there is some truth to it. You were adopted." My heart sank, even though I'd already known it was true. "But," she continued, "the circumstances are nothing like what Jessica implied. You weren't some random child we took in out of pity. You are family, sweetheart." "You've always been family." She opened the wooden box and pulled out a stack of papers and photographs. "Your biological mother was my daughter, too. Your father's twin sister, Elizabeth. She died giving birth to you, and her husband died in Afghanistan 2 months before you were born." I stared at her, not comprehending. "But Mom and Dad only had one child. Dad was an only child." "No, honey. Elizabeth was his twin. She moved to California when she was 18, after a fight with her parents about her boyfriend, your biological father, Marcus. They eloped, and she cut off contact with the family out of pride and stubbornness. By the time your parents found out she was pregnant and alone, Marcus had already deployed." Nana Rose handed me a photograph, black and white, slightly faded. It showed a young woman who looked exactly like a female version of the father I remembered. Next to her stood a handsome young man in military fatigues. When Elizabeth died in childbirth, the hospital contacted us as next of kin. Your parents, Richard and Margaret, flew to California immediately. They brought you home, and they loved you as their own from the very first moment they held you. But why didn't they tell me? The question came out as barely a whisper. They were going to, when you were older. But then the accident happened when you were 15, and I couldn't bear to add to your grief. You'd just lost the only parents you'd ever known. How could I tell you they weren't your biological parents? It seemed like it would only cause more pain. I looked at the photograph again, studying the faces of people I'd never met but who had given me life. Elizabeth had my eyes, my nose, my stubborn chin. She looked so young, so happy despite whatever struggles had led her to cut ties with her family. "Jessica knew?" I asked. Nana Rose nodded reluctantly. "The whole family knew, except you. But we all agreed it wasn't our place to tell you. That was something your parents should have done. And after they died, I kept waiting for the right moment. But it never seemed to come. And she used it as a weapon." The bitterness in my own voice surprised me. "Jessica has been struggling," Nana Rose said carefully. "David's business really is in trouble, and they're facing some financial difficulties. When I mentioned changing my will, I think desperation made her say things she didn't mean." "Oh, she meant them," I said flatly. "You don't say something that cruel in the heat of the moment unless it's been festering inside you for years." We sat in silence for a while, and I studied the other documents in the box. Birth certificates, adoption papers, letters from Elizabeth to her parents that had been returned unopened. A whole history of family pain and misunderstanding that had led to me growing up without knowing my true origins. "Am I still getting the house?" I asked suddenly, surprising myself with the question. Nana Rose smiled sadly. "Do you still want it? After everything that's happened?" I thought about it. This house had been my sanctuary after my parents died. It was where I'd learned to cook from Nana Rose, where I'd done homework at the kitchen table, where I'd brought boyfriends to meet the family. It was where I'd chosen to stay close to, even when opportunities called me elsewhere. "Yes," I said finally. "Not because of the money, but because it's home. It's always been home, regardless of DNA." "Then yes, honey, it's still yours." Over the next few weeks, I had to face the reality of my new family dynamic. Jessica continued to call, but her messages shifted from angry demands to increasingly desperate pleas. David had been laid off from his investment firm, and they were facing foreclosure on their Connecticut home. She wanted to meet, to talk, to work something out. I ignored her calls for 2 weeks, focusing instead on spending time with Nana Rose and learning more about Elizabeth and Marcus. I discovered that Marcus had been a decorated soldier who died in an IED explosion just weeks before he was supposed to come home. Elizabeth had been a talented artist who'd planned to raise me alone while pursuing her painting career. She would have been a wonderful mother, Nana Rose told me one evening as we looked through Elizabeth's sketchbooks. She had such a generous heart, just like yours, but I couldn't ignore Jessica forever. She showed up at my apartment on a rainy Thursday evening in November, looking haggard and desperate. Her usually perfectly styled blonde hair was limp and unstyled, and she'd lost weight in a way that made her look gaunt rather than fashionable. "Please," she said when I opened the door. "Just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on my couch, the same one where I'd processed the truth about my adoption, and broke down crying. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I was horrible to you. I said things I can never take back. But Sarah, we're about to lose everything. The house, David's car, the kids' college funds. I was just so scared and angry, and I took it out on you." Looking at her, I felt a mixture of pity and lingering hurt. This was still my sister. Adopted or not, she was the person who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with algebra homework. But she was also the person who'd weaponized my deepest insecurities and used a family secret to try to wound me. "What do you want from me, Jessica?" I asked quietly. "I want us to share the inheritance," she said, not meeting my eyes. 50-50. Sell the house, split the money. It would solve all our problems, and it's fair. We're both Nana's granddaughters, right? There it was. Even now, even after her tearful apology, it all came down to money. I stood up and walked to my kitchen, pulling out a manila folder I'd been keeping in my junk drawer for the past week. Inside was something I'd been working on since that terrible dinner, a document that had taken me hours of research and several consultations with a lawyer friend to get just right. "Actually, Jessica," I said, returning to the living room, "I have something for you." I handed her the folder. "Remember when you said I wasn't family? Well, I've been thinking about that, and I've decided you might be right." Her face paled as she opened the folder and began reading. It was a legal document, carefully crafted and notarized, outlining my intention to challenge the will on the grounds that, as an adopted child with no legal standing in the family, I should not be considered a direct heir. But that wasn't the part that made Jessica's hands shake as she read. The document went on to specify that, should I successfully contest my own inheritance, I intended to ensure that the house would be sold and the proceeds donated entirely to the local foster care system, specifically to a program that helped older foster children transition to independent living. "Sarah, what is this?" she whispered. "It's exactly what you wanted," I said calmly. "You said I wasn't family, so I'm removing myself from the family inheritance. But here's the thing, Jessica. If I'm not family, then neither are you entitled to what would have been my share. This document ensures that if I can't have it, no one in the family can." The irony was perfect, and I could see her understanding it in real time. In her greed and cruelty, she'd given me the exact weapon I needed to ensure that her tantrum would cost her everything she'd been grasping for. "You can't do this," she breathed. "Actually, I can. I've already filed the preliminary paperwork. The only way to stop it is if I choose to withdraw the challenge myself." Jessica stared at the document, then at me, her face cycling through emotions faster than I could track them. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to think about what family really means," I said. "I want you to consider whether love and support and being there for each other matters more than DNA and money. And I want you to decide if you can truly accept me as your sister, your real sister, regardless of how I came to be part of this family." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, calculating costs and benefits like David probably did with his investments. If I apologize, really apologize and mean it, if I accept you as my sister, will you withdraw this challenge?" I shook my head. "It's not that simple, Jessica. This isn't about getting an apology from you. This is about rebuilding trust that you destroyed with one cruel moment. It's about proving that you value our relationship more than you value money. How do I prove that?" I picked up another document from the coffee table, one I'd prepared, but hadn't been sure I'd have the courage to present. "By agreeing to this, I said, handing it to her. It was a family contract of sorts, outlining our mutual responsibilities to Nana Rose for the remainder of her life. Jessica would commit to visiting at least twice a month, would take on specific caregiving responsibilities when needed, and would contribute financially to any care expenses that arose. In exchange, when Nana Rose passed away, we would share the inheritance equally, but not before. The house stays with Nana Rose as long as she's alive, I explained. We both take care of her. We both earn our place in this family through our actions, not our DNA. And if either of us fails to hold up our end of the bargain, the other gets everything. Jessica read through the document carefully, and I could see her wrestling with it. It wasn't what she wanted. Immediate money to solve her immediate problems. But it was something, and it was fair. What about our financial situation? She asked. We might lose the house before, then you'll figure something else out, I said. Downsize. Move back to Massachusetts temporarily. Ask David's parents for help. Do what families do when they're struggling. Lean on each other and find solutions that don't involve throwing each other under the bus. She was quiet for a long time, staring at the contract. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I really am sorry, Sarah. What I said, it was unforgivable. It was, I agreed. But forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what kind of person you choose to be. Jessica signed the contract that night. Over the following months, she kept her word. She moved her family back to Massachusetts temporarily, staying with David's parents while he looked for work locally. She visited Nana Rose twice a week, helped with grocery shopping and doctor's appointments, and slowly began to rebuild the relationship she'd damaged with her cruel words. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, times when I caught her looking at the house with calculating eyes, wondering how much longer she'd have to wait. But there were also moments of genuine connection. Afternoons when we'd sit with Nana Rose looking through old photo albums, evenings when Jessica would call just to check on me, holidays when it almost felt like we were a real family again. Nana Rose lived for another 2 years, and they were good years. She got to see both of her granddaughters working together to take care of her, got to watch Jessica's marriage strengthen as she and David learned to face their problems as a team instead of looking for easy solutions. She got to see me finally start dating someone serious. A teacher named Michael, who understood the importance of family and roots. When Nana Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep on a spring morning in 2025, Jessica and I were both there. We'd been taking turns staying overnight toward the end, and that particular night happened to be mine. But Jessica had arrived early that morning with coffee and pastries, planning to spend the day helping with some house maintenance. We found her together, looking peaceful in her bed with the morning sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows, and we grieved together, as sisters should. The house sold for $520,000. After taxes and expenses, we each inherited $240,000. Jessica and David used their share to buy a modest home in Springfield and start David's own financial consulting practice. I used mine for a down payment on a house 3 streets away from where Nana Rose had lived, close enough to feel connected to our family history, far enough to build my own life. But the most valuable thing I inherited wasn't money. It was the knowledge of who I really am. Not just the adopted daughter who'd been living a lie, but Elizabeth and Marcus's child, raised with love by people who chose to make me family. It was the understanding that family isn't about DNA. It's about the people who show up for each other, day after day, through good times and bad. And it was the hard-won wisdom that sometimes the cruelest truths can lead to the most honest relationships, if you're brave enough to work through the pain instead of walking away. Jessica and I will never have the uncomplicated relationship we had before that terrible dinner. But we have something better now. A relationship built on truth, on mutual respect, earned through actions, and on the conscious choice to be sisters to each other. Sometimes I think about Elizabeth, the mother I never knew, and wonder what she would think of how her story turned out. I like to believe she'd be proud that her daughter learned to fight for family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose to build and maintain through love, forgiveness, and commitment. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family or struggled with the difference between blood relations and chosen family, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe because next week, I'll be sharing another incredible true story about the secrets families keep and the courage it takes to face them. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.